Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education University, and I'm your host, Tim Bogats. Ladies, gentlemen, it is almost the end of the school year, and I am aware, for a select few of you, that the end of school actually happened last week. And the rest of us are happy for you and a little bit jealous and just kind of wondering when it will be our turn to step away. And most importantly, how we survive until that time actually comes. Because let's face it, the end of the year is difficult on art teachers. There is so much left to be done, so much to deal with. And maybe foremost on all of our minds, the kids are just not that interested in being there. So today we're going to talk about how you can keep your kids engaged, keep them interested, and keep them creating art through the end of the year. Now, my guest today is going to be Jordan DeWilde. You probably know Jordan as Mr. DeWilde on social media and on his website. And as of last month, he is now a writer for The Art of Ed. Now, we are very excited to have him. And after talking on the podcast here with Sarah Krajewski last month and Nick Gale just a couple weeks ago, that completes the trifecta of new writers that we have. Now, Jordan has so many great ideas for just about everything he does, honestly, and I want to ask him to share a few of those. In particular, he wrote a great article a couple weeks ago that is going to be relevant to what we're talking about keeping your kids engaged at the end of the year. So I hope that can serve as kind of a jumping off point for a bigger discussion, and I hope we can dive into a variety of topics. Let's bring on Jordan, and I'll go ahead and get the interview started. All right, and Jordan DeWilde is with me now. Jordan, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am really, really well. I'm excited to talk to you. You've had some awesome articles published on the AOE site. I know people kind of want to hear more about you, I guess. So to start with, can you just kind of introduce yourself to all of our listeners? I know a few people know you from your website. You have a really popular Instagram account, but can you tell us about you, your job, your interests, and I guess some of the things that you're going to be writing about for The Art of Ed?
Sure. Well, my name is Jordan DeWilde. I teach elementary in a school called Oregon Elementary School. It's a small town about 90 miles west of Chicago. I teach grades 3 through 6. I have taught some of the younger grades since I've been there. This is my 7th year teaching elementary. But the last few years, I've really focused on upper elementary, the 3rd through 6th graders. Kind of my main interest as far as art education goes is creating inclusive curriculum. So I'm always trying to find ways to create new lessons that celebrate diversity and provide positive representation of as many people as I can to my students. And those are some of the topics I've been writing a lot about for Art of Ed magazine, as well as creating some pro packs that have some of that diversity component to them. But I'm also sharing some other ideas about other lessons, practical tips from my experience, and some skill-based things as well.
Yeah, that all sounds really good. Like I said, people have responded really well to kind of what they've seen so far. But you have an article about, keeping kids engaged at the end of the year. And that's one that I really wanted to talk about because it's so apt, like it's so important right now. Because, some teachers are finishing up right now. Some teachers still have a month or so to go. But no matter where we are, just about everybody is kind of feeling overwhelmed. So question would be for you, like, what kind of advice do you have for people that are finishing out the year? Like, how do you keep your kids engaged? How do you keep them going strong?
Yeah, it's a really hectic time of year, stressful time of year. So I think anything you can do to make your classroom more engaging and make things easier on yourself are going to be welcome for you and your students. So some things that I do, I like to throw students kind of a curveball, give them something new that they haven't experienced before. it can be as simple as, a new material or changing up the layout of the classroom. Sometimes just those simple fixes, simple changes can really do a lot for your classroom. So like whether it's, right now I have 6 tables for my students, but if I just, change that into like a horseshoe formation or just 3 long tables instead, just that simple change kind of changes the vibe of the classroom environment. As far as lessons that making them engaging, like giving students a new material. For example, my 6th graders were working on Mayan glyphs. And so instead of just having them draw or design a glyph of their own on paper, I've given them metal tooling foil. So they get to use something that's metallic and shiny. It's tooling foil, which they've never experienced before. So essentially, they're just drawing their symbol out, but because they're making a repoussé on that, they're carving into the foil. They're really into it. It's something they haven't done before, and they get to use Sharpie permanent markers to add color to it later. So they get really into that because it's something they haven't experienced. Likewise, my 4th grade students were doing Gyataku fish printing. Just the magic of that process of print is really engaging for them. We're making these kind of light wash paper backgrounds for them, so they get to use a spray bottle full of watered down tempera paint. So just that simple thing of, they get to use a spray bottle to spray paint onto paper. Like they're super into that. They think that's great. So it's stuff that they're not expecting, stuff they haven't done before. The fish prints, they get to paint a rubber fish. That's, mind blowing for them. So they're really into that, and that helps them get excited about coming to art. They're more engaged. They're more in tune to what you're teaching instead of doing, I guess, more of the same. They're not doing another drawing that they've done before or another painting project. It's something completely new, completely out of their realm of previous experience. So they're a little bit more engaged. One other thing I would suggest maybe doing to make things easier on yourself is, try a new project that you haven't done before, that your students haven't done before, but instead of, sectioning that off to one grade level, maybe do it with a couple grade levels. So that's one less thing you have to prep, one less set of resources and materials you have to get ready. And I find that's really helpful for both the end of the year and the beginning of the year. Both can be very stressful times. If you can do a project that's with all your grade levels, or maybe a couple, or here and there, it makes life a little easier on you. You get to test out a new project. You can decide whether you want to keep it later or not, and maybe select one grade level you want to do that with in the future. But for that first run, do it with as many classes as you can. Save yourself some time and energy by less prep work, and hopefully engaging your students and doing something new that is engaging for you as well.
Yeah, I think that's some really good advice. And, I always try and follow. I feel like the end of the year is the perfect time to try out those new lessons. It's a good trial run to see if it's something that, you'd want to put in your permanent rotation of lessons.
Right.
But another thing in your article that I had to ask you about here, one of your suggestions in there is to have your kids collaborate. And I have to admit, like when I first read that, I was kind of dismissive. I'm like, now is not the time to, have kids collaborating because things are just so crazy. Like, do we really want to add that kind of chaos to our classrooms? But you seem to feel pretty strongly that it's worthwhile. So can you just talk a little bit about that? Like why you think collaboration is going to be good for kids at the end of the year here?
I think it's definitely probably an unpopular opinion at this time of year to open up your classroom for that kind of chaos. But
right.
I think at this time of year, it's kind of if you can't beat them, join them, lean into the chaos. They're already wanting to talk. They're already wanting to get out of their seat. So how can you allow them to do that while still structuring some learning experiences, some creating opportunities, and keeping them busy still, so that it's not just a free for all. But collaboration it has worked well for me at the end of the year. It's something again, it's something that makes the kids excited coming to class, and you're not fighting the shutdown at the end of the year that sometimes happens with students. So. Letting them collaborate. I've done a couple projects at the end of the year that have worked well with collaboration. I did students created a basketball court design based on this collaboration that Nina Chanel Abney did with the University of North Carolina. So she was an artist in residence there and then worked with college students to plan out a mural on a basketball court. So I have students come up with their own ideas for what they would put on a basketball court, but they have to work with a partner to combine their two ideas. So they get to pick a partner, they're collaborating, they're sharing ideas, they're talking about symbols and how the artists use symbols and what symbols they want to use. So there's, they're excited that they get to work with their friends. They're excited that they're, making this basketball court design, which is something they hadn't thought of before. So it's something that they're engaged in. A bigger collaboration project I've done in the past has been doing a mural, an actual larger mural based on the work of Keith Haring. So it kind of was the ending project, that students had been leading up to with other Keith Haring related works before, but they collaborated to create this large mural in the back of the classroom. And so they got to be out of their seats. Everybody had a job. So it wasn't just like everyone was painting and it got crazy and it was out of control. Not everyone was painting at the same time. Some of them were working on their individual projects. Some of them were lead designers and they were doing the outline of the figure on the mural while they had a team of painters that were painting the interior. Others were, documenting the process. So I let them use cameras and a video camera to kind of go around the room and take pictures and video of what students were working on. I had some think of ways to reflect on the project, what they liked about Keith Haring, what they did for their individual project. We did what I called a social issue project. So they had to use Keith Haring figures to address some sort of social issue that they chose. So they could talk about that. They could talk about what they liked about the mural, the process of all that. So there was plenty to do. There was lots going on. Everybody had something that they could do, even if they weren't doing the act of painting on the mural. They had something else they could be working on. That really works for me, something that I really like doing. But then again, I am also a teacher that likes a very social classroom atmosphere, and that's not everyone. And I think that comes from my own school experience. Like I had art teachers that also liked that, and we were at kind of lab table settings and we talked throughout the whole class, but we were working. And I think if that's your style, then yes, collaboration may work for you. But if that's not, and that's not a wrong thing, it's not a bad thing. Everybody teaches differently. But it's something, you might want to try.
Yeah, I think that's good advice also. And you mentioned a couple things in that answer that I want to ask about. I'll try and kind of tie them together. The first is kind of being responsive to your kids, what they need, what they're interested in, not only in how you run your classroom, but what you're doing as well. The basketball court is a great example of that. And with that, you talk a little bit in this article about making projects student-centered like that. And you discuss the court design and a couple other things in your article about connecting with kids who are interested in sports. So I guess the question is, like, tying that all together, why do you think that doing student-centered projects is so important? And what do you think kids gain from you doing that, from you designing your lessons like that?
I think, after a while, they start to realize that each project is going to be unique to them. And that's what I want them to kind of get from my classroom, that they are not just creating artwork that is pretty or that follows X, Y, and Z directions. They are making unique things that are about themselves. So, in that article, I'm giving lots of examples of how students have approached my projects with a sports theme. But in that same project, there may have been a student in the same class that was really into animals and just has this whole animal theme. Or it might have been a student who's really into video games and they put in this whole video game theme. So it's, there are project requirements and project steps and parameters, but, incorporate something about yourself within that project so that not every project looks the same. I know there are lots of great art projects out there where students are learning some skills and every project looks the same. And there is learning involved in that, but there's not, necessarily any creativity, and there's definitely no personal component to that. So in my lessons, I try to always give students that encouragement to have them be more invested in it. If it's something, if they're a basketball fan and they get to put basketball in their project, like they're just so much more excited about it. They're going to maybe, put a little more pride into it because it's something they get to choose. And that's something my school district has really been pushing across the board in all classes the last couple of years is,
Right.
Having students be involved in their learning and have them take ownership of what they are learning. Yes, we have standards to address and to meet, but how can we make students see that, those apply to them personally, not just to third grade, but themselves uniquely?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I love that, your district is trying to bring that everywhere, because I think it is so valuable, and it's something that we can do really, really well in the art room.
Yeah, I think art, definitely lends itself well where it can be more open-ended than maybe some other classrooms. I know a lot of teachers in my district are kind of struggling with that. How do we get students to be owners, be I guess how to get students to be involved in their learning and to make their own choices. In other classes, it's maybe a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. That's somewhere where we can 100% lead the way. And I think, art teachers in that case have something to offer, the rest of the teachers in the building. So for sure, it's something we do well. I also wanted to ask you, you've obviously been super busy with AOEU stuff. You had a learning pack come out at the beginning of this month that's all about celebrating diversity through contemporary art. So you just kind of touched on this briefly at the very beginning, but can you tell us a little bit more about why you're passionate about that topic, and also a little more about the learning pack, like what kind of ideas teachers can get when they're watching you in that pack?
Sure. Yeah. So creating, inclusive curriculum, celebrating diversity, that has kind of been the core of my teaching philosophy, even before I started teaching or before I knew I wanted to be a teacher. That was just some of the topics that I really enjoyed most in school. I had teachers that sparked that interest, and I remember learning about the Harlem Renaissance and World War II and the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s in my language arts classes, or in my history classes, or even in my art classes too. And those figures, those stories from those units specifically, were ones that stuck with me long after I was done with school.
Yeah.
So when I decided to become an art teacher, I think that was just kind of a natural progression. I could incorporate some of those things. And once I went into school to go into broadcasting, and then I decided, no, I should have been an art teacher. So I went to grad school, and I was really concerned about becoming a teacher and also being a gay man, and how that might be a difficult career choice for me. And there were several people, including even some of my professors, who made comments that, LGBTQ plus educators should either be in the closet and remain silent about their identity, or should choose a new profession. And so that was, a little bit difficult for me, and I struggled with that. But I had a professor who encouraged me to not only be authentic with my life and to become a teacher, but research these concerns. So I started researching all these issues in art education. NAEA has a LGBT issues caucus, and there's lots of information out there. But as I was doing this research on LGBT educators, I naturally started finding more information about why these issues needed to be advocated for young students, and to show them, inclusive classrooms, safe spaces, and those types of topics. And so my research started to shift, and really seeing that, multicultural education, some of those same reasons for including race and ethnicity diversity in your curriculum could apply to sexual orientation and gender identity. So I really kind of took those learning experiences from my own school, where I was really interested in these different cases of overcoming adversity and resilience from different cultural groups, and then what I wanted to do for LGBTQ plus students. And that's just been a big part of my curriculum since then, making it as inclusive as possible, whether it's race, whether it's ethnicity, cultural groups, different countries, sexual orientation, gender identity. I try to incorporate as many people, many artists, many issues as I can within my curriculum, so that my students have positive representation of everyone. And that's a big part of what the ProPack is about. And contemporary art is a great place where you can find lots of those issues and lots of representation from different groups. And so I think a lot of people sometimes see diversity as something that is not as accessible to elementary students.
Yeah.
But I show a lot of practical approaches of ways that you can share that with elementary students that I actually have done with my students. So I have student artwork examples, how I've approached some of those different groups and how I've included them in the curriculum.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think that'll be perfect for everybody who kind of wants to explore those issues a little bit more, figure out how to bring some of those ideas into your classroom. So thank you for sharing all of that. But we are right up against it as far as time goes. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up. But Jordan, can you just, before we go, just kind of tell everybody where they can find you as far as your website, Instagram, anything else you want to share?
Sure. They can find me pretty much. Mr. DeWilde Art is kind of my name across the board. So Instagram and Twitter at Mr. DeWilde Art. My website is mrdewildeart.com, Mr. DeWilde Art on Facebook. So there's plenty of places to find me and find examples of my lessons and stuff the kids are working on. Perfect.
That'll be great. All right, Jordan, thank you so much for coming on. And hopefully we can get you back on again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
As I said, Jordan has so many interesting things to say about so many different topics, and I really appreciate him coming on and talking about all of his ideas and all of his philosophies with me. Now, if you want to hear more from Jordan, definitely check out his articles. He's written a lot of great stuff already, and honestly, we're only about a half dozen articles in. And to be fair, to be truthful, I cannot recommend his Pro Learning Pack highly enough. He has one that was just released at the beginning of May called Celebrating Diversity Through Contemporary Art. It is amazing, and it is a great resource because he talks specifically about incorporating current artists, how you can do that in an age-appropriate manner. And I think he shows like 5 or 6 different lessons that are all amazing. So no matter what level you teach, there's something you can take away there from his contemporary art pack. Again, it's called Celebrating Diversity Through Contemporary Art. A lot of his best ideas are shared there. And if you liked what you heard on the podcast today, I would definitely recommend searching that out and hearing from Jordan just a little bit more. But anyway, long story short, Mr. DeWilde has some incredible ideas, and I'm thankful he was able to come on the podcast and share them with everyone. So I hope you have an idea or two that you picked up from hearing him that you can take back to your classroom, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that just might help you survive the end of the year. Art Ed Radio is produced by the Art of Education University with audio engineering from Michael Crocker.